Hey, what's up guys? This is Youth Man. In this video, I'll be sharing with you my final review of the Marantz AV7705 preamp processor paired up with the Emotiva XPA-11 11-channel amplifier. Now before we get into the video, if you're into home theater, audio, and video, hit that subscribe button. And don't forget to hit that bell notification so that you'll be notified when the next video drops. All right, guys, I have had the Marantz AV7705 and the Emotiva XPA-11 in my home theater for a little bit over a month. And about 2 weeks ago, I gave you kind of my initial impressions of this combination in my setup. Now, for those of you that may not be familiar with my setup, I've got a 7.2.4 Dolby Atmos system. Now, that's a Klipsch system consisting of 3 Klipsch La Scalas up front, 4 Klipsch RS62 version 2s for my side surrounds and my rear surrounds, and 4 Klipsch CDT 5800C version 2 in ceiling for my Dolby Atmos speakers. For the low end, I have a pair of dual SVS PB16 Ultra subwoofers. So prior to getting the 7705 and the Emotiva XPA-11 in for review, I had been powering my entire 7.2.4 Dolby Atmos system with a Marantz SR8012 receiver. I wanted to find out for myself in my own theater, is there a big difference between having an AVR, which is a AV receiver, which is your preamp and a processor and an amplifier all built in one chassis, or is there a difference between going from that to separates, which is when you have the preamp processor in one unit and the amplification in another chassis. So today I had a blast, man. I went through several hours of content, really kind of honing in on Dolby Atmos content. Now, there were 2 movies that I really just spent a lot of time just kind of diving into it, listening for certain things, tweaking a couple of the settings in the 7705. So the first movie I put in today was Insurgent. Now, Insurgent, I really like the whole Divergent series. That was just a fun series. Haven't seen it in quite some time, but I went back to it because it's got a great Dolby Atmos track in it. And there's a certain scene that I jumped to, and so I skipped all the way to 1 hour and 28 minutes into the movie. And in this scene, you have Triss behind this glass partition, and the lady is kind of talking to her, and she's just kind of really agitating her, and she's pushing her buttons. And Triss gets really ticked off and just busts through the glass. And when she busts through the glass, the ceiling just kind of came alive, man. I mean, it was slow motion glass, but you're hearing it come from the front sound stage. You're hearing it come from the side surrounds, the rear sounds, and then just these, bits and pieces of glass kind of coming down from the top. Sounded phenomenal, man. It was cool. Definitely was so much fun. So that scene doesn't end there though. She runs after her, she tackles her, she flies through the air, and as she's flying through the air, you're hearing this shoo, 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 and all this electricity that's just whizzing by. You're hearing it in those Dolby Atmos channels. And the separation of all those individual pieces was phenomenal. And then once she busts through the wall and she's out in the air and she's falling, even that part was just incredibly done. Very well mixed. And so that whole segment there was just a fun Atmos sequence. And so if you haven't had a chance to check out the Divergent and especially the Insurgent series, go get those videos. I'll link to them down in the description below. It's just a fun series. But man, the Atmos in that was probably some of the best Atmos that I've heard. And again, because in certain movies, there's Atmos going on. Like say, for instance, in Ready Player One. Ready Player One has a lot of Atmos going on, but there's so much other stuff going on that they kind of get lost a little bit, in my opinion. They definitely don't stand out, but in that scene, it's kind of quiet, and you've got this shoo, 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 so there's individual elements that are kind of happening at this, at different times. And it was just so much fun, and it was exciting, man. It really helped to bring that movie alive. And so this 7705 and the Emotiva, man, it handled that just beautifully. Now I also have the Monoprice Monolith 15-inch subwoofer that I was using during that sequence. I had turned off my PB16s and I was just running that sub, and man, that was impressive in and of itself. So I'll save my comments and thoughts on that for a future video. But this place was just rocking, man. Crystal clear. When the glass shattered, man, it was just so detailed. Just little bits of glass. It was almost like you could hear that piece of glass there shatter, and that piece of glass there, and this piece coming at you. And it was just so well done. And it was kind of like in this slow motion as well. So it was just so much fun. So then the second movie I popped in was Mad Max. And sad to say, I have yet to see the entire movie of Mad Max. I know, that's a great movie. It's got great Dolby Atmos content. But I jumped to, again, a couple of scenes in that. And one of the scenes was the big chase, you know. I think it's about 27 minutes into the video. There's just this big chase across the desert. And man, I mean, that was a blast. Okay, again, there was a lot more going on there, so the Atmos didn't stand out to me as much as in Insurgent, but definitely I could hear there were certain times that, you know, a truck would hit or something would fly over and the Atmos speakers would just be right on. And so that was just fun. A lot of LFE there, a lot of bottom end, stuff's exploding, cars are roaring by, lots of yelling. You got music jamming with a dude with a guitar and a flaming guitar. That's just a fun movie, man. And so again, I got to watch the whole thing, but it looked pretty exciting, looked pretty entertaining. And then as they drive further on, they get to this sandstorm. And when they enter the sandstorm, man, there's cars that get sucked up in the air and they're flying around, they're circling around. And man, I could just hear all of that detail just individually, just kind of going from one speaker to the next. Because with Dolby Atmos, the way that that's encoded, they use object-based kind of reproduction. And so they can manipulate any one of those sound elements into any one of the speakers at any given time. And so, man, just again, that was just another really, really fun demonstration of what the 7705 and the Emotiva XPA-11 can do for Dolby Atmos, DTSX, as well as Oro 3D. And so let me just share with you a couple of things that I really have enjoyed on the 7705. Let's just focus on that for a second. The 7705, the biggest thing that I really, really love is channel separation. I don't know what they've done to the 7705 in comparison to the 8012 that I have, but there's something different about that. And I think honestly it's more so with the preamp processor, the 7705, than it is with the Emotiva. And the reason why I say that is because I've owned 3 power amplifiers over the past probably 12 years. I started out with a PairSound HCA2205, which was a 220 by 5 channel amplifier. Then I moved to a B&K 200.7, which was a 200 watt by 7. And then I moved to a Sherborne 7/2100A, which that was a 200 by 7. It was basically 7 monoblock amplifiers inside one chassis. It weighed like 115 pounds. This thing was a monster, but I really felt that it didn't add that much difference to my setup, just having the amplifier added to a receiver using the receiver's pre-outs. And so I ended up selling that, the last one, which was the Sherborne, and went back to a receiver because with my speakers now, I have Klipsch speakers. My front 3 speakers are really, really sensitive. They have a 104 decibel rating with 1 watt at 1 meter. And so basically it just means that those speakers can get really loud with very little volume. And so I don't necessarily need a huge amplifier to power this whole system. A receiver like the 8012 does a very good job at doing that. But there's something kind of almost magical about the 7705. I really think that that's what's making the biggest difference. And of course, I've got another amplifier in for review, so I'll be swapping it out with the Emotiva here shortly. And so I'll be able to tell, okay, is it the amplifier that made that big of a difference, or was it mostly the 7705, or a combination of both? And so definitely got some more testing to do in regards to that. But man, there's just something really, really sweet about that combination. I really like what I'm hearing in my home theater. I love the fact that the 7705, because the amplification is separate, I don't generate hardly any heat from that. During the movie, I cranked it up, we're blasting the room, stuff shaking, and then at the end of the movie, it's warm, but it's not like hot like the 8012 does. The 8012 gets very, very hot because it's got that big, massive toroidal transformer inside of it, and so that generates just a lot of heat. But the 7705 doesn't really generate any heat, at least very little, because it doesn't have that big amplification, that big power amp built into it. And so that's definitely a plus in my room, because this room kind of gets warm on its own. So anytime that I can cut back on heat, that's a great thing for my home theater. Another thing I love about the 7705 is it has the same exact menu structure as my 8012. And so it's very familiar to me, very comfortable, laid out really, really nice, super easy to navigate, to set up with Odyssey and run that and calibrate it. It's just got a really nice menu structure. I've seen some other receivers and pre-pros that have kind of this clunky, kind of archaic looking menu structure, but I really like just the usability of it. I like the way that it looks, the way it functions, and I just really like the simplicity of it, but it gives you a lot of flexibility on changing a lot of the settings in the preamp itself. Another thing I like about the 7705 is it has just a musicality about it. I've owned a bunch of different receivers, from Yamaha to an old Emotiva UMC1 Pre-Pro. I've had Harman Kardon. I've had a lot of different receivers here in my home theater, and for some reason the Marantz just has this nice musicality about it. And some guys have referred to it as, Marantz putting a musical chip in it. Maybe they do. I'm not sure what makes it different, but I really like the way that that gels with my Klipsch speakers, and it sounds just really, really great. Especially like for things like concert DVDs. Movies like The Greatest Showman sound really phenomenal on this setup, and so there's just that musicality. It just sounds really great, not only for movies, but also music, whether it's 2-channel or whether you've got it in like a surround sound format. Both of those sound really, really well on the 7705. Now, just like my 8012, the 7705 has pretty much a lot of the same features. It'll process Dolby Atmos, DTS:X, Oro 3D, as well as IMAX Enhanced. So all 4 of these formats are built into the unit. You don't have to pay anything extra. You don't have to purchase any kind of additional software or hardware to get those features. They're built into the unit. It also has AirPlay 2 as well as Bluetooth connectivity, and so I'm able to stream directly from my phone, like music from Spotify, and go straight into the system and listen to music very, very easily and conveniently through my setup. So definitely I love those features as well. Now, so far I really haven't found anything that I dislike about the 7705. Very similar again to my 8012. I've been very pleased with that. The only thing on the 8012 is it got very hot. With the 7705, since there is no amplification inside the chassis, it doesn't really get hot. And so the only negative that I found with the 8012 was solved basically and resolved with the 7705. And so as of right now, I don't really see any negatives on. Okay, there's one negative, the little porthole. Everybody complains about that. The little porthole is pretty much useless. The reason why I don't consider it a negative in my part is because I have it sitting inside and behind my audio video cabinet. And so I never see the porthole because I've got a 150-inch screen that has the volume. I can access any of the settings and I can see everything. So I don't necessarily need to see the porthole, and I don't even need to see the front display that's hidden behind that front door panel. All right, so now let's jump over to talking about the Emotiva XPA-11. The XPA-11 is an 11-channel amplifier. Now I wanted something that was 11 channels that would be able to power all of my speakers, because with a pre-pro like the 7705, there is no internal amplification. So it's not like you can get a 3-channel or a 5-channel or a 7-channel amplifier and use the 7705 to power the rest of the speakers. You can't do that. You need to power all of the speakers in your setup. So I needed one that was capable of handling 11 channels. And instead of having a 7-channel and a 5-channel, I just went ahead and said, okay, let's look and see how well will the 11-channel under one chassis, how will that perform in my theater room and in my setup. The XPA-11 consists of 3 power modules, which those are 300 watts each. And so you have 300 watts by 3. So those channels are powering my LCR, my left, center, and my right channel speaker. And then it has 4 stereo modules, so that's a total of 8 speakers. So that handled the rest of my side surrounds, my back surrounds, and my 4 Dolby Atmos in-ceiling speakers. Now each one of those stereo modules are 65 watts a channel. And so typically most guys will tell you that your front sound stage is where you need the majority of your power, and then your side surrounds and the Atmos speakers, they don't get as much content, and so they're not going to draw as much power and require as much power. Now I don't do a whole lot of measuring in that respect. All I can tell you is from personal experience in my setup, this amplifier had no problem powering all 11 of my speakers. Now again, my speakers are very sensitive. Most of them aren't 104 dB sensitivity like my La Scalas, but even the side surrounds and the top, Atmos speakers, they're still very sensitive. They're way up in the high 90s, 98, 97 dB, whereas some of the other brands like SVS or B&W, those types of things, they're going to require more power to get the same volume that I would here in my theater room. So just kind of keep that in mind. So 65 watts might not be enough for power hungry speakers. And so just keep that in consideration. But one thing to kind of know as well is it takes twice the power to gain 3 decibels in volume. So 3 decibels isn't a lot. And so to go from a 65 watt to get more volume out of it, to get only 3 decibels more, you got to go from 65 watts to like 130 watt per channel, okay? So just going from 65 to 85, you'll never hear that difference. But if you went from 65 to 130, 150, 200 watts, then of course you're going to hear a difference in the levels and the volume on that. So some of the positives, number one, I love the way the Emotiva looks. But the Emotiva, man, it's just got this beautiful faceplate, man. The blue looks awesome. I even love their logo. Pretty much everything about it, man. It's just very simple, very clean. If you don't like the LED lights, there's a toggle switch on the back that allows you to switch on and off. Some of the other features that I really like, I personally don't use them, which is the XLR. Some of you guys really want to use balanced inputs. And so if you want to use balanced connections with XLR, it has that capability. And there's just little toggle switches and buttons on the back that toggle whether or not you're using RCA connections or XLR connections. I love the fact that everything's housed in one unit. Now granted, there's probably some compromises there. Part of that compromise is you don't have, say for instance, 200 watts by 11. You just can't fit that in that one chassis. And so you're losing some power in those 8 channels, and it's going down to 65 watts per channel. But having amplification for 11 speakers in one chassis, that's a huge benefit for most guys. Unless you've got just a big rack and you've got plenty of space to put multiple amplifiers, I can definitely see how this would fit in a lot of home theaters. The other big benefit of having 11 channels in one chassis is it's a cost saver. If you were to purchase several multi-channel amplifiers, 200 watts by 5 or 200 watts by 7, you're going to spend a lot more money than you would buying a $2,000 11-channel amplifier. And so for you guys that are wanting to find a power amplifier that'll handle all of your speakers for Dolby Atmos, DTS:X, Auro 3D, IMAX Enhanced, that's a great bargain for $2,000. Now, another cool thing about this particular model, so the XPA11 is basically kind of a custom unit. So if you look on their website, they have a bunch of different ways that you can configure this. This is what they call a modular design. You can customize it to however many of the power modules, so that's the 300 watts. So if you wanted to do 7 of those power blocks, so you would have 7 of those 300 watt per channel, you could set it up that way. Or like in this setup, we've got 3 power modules and then 4 stereo pair to make up 11 channels. And so there's a lot of flexibility there. So definitely check out Emotiva's website and you kind of see how you might need to set it up for your system. Now, a couple other things I really like about the XPA11, the heat. It doesn't generate a lot of heat, and the reason it doesn't is because it's a different class. I believe it's either a class G or an H topography, and that's kind of just how they've structured that. So in some amplifiers, like say for instance, most of the amplifiers I've owned over the years were class AB amplifiers. Typically with AB amplifiers, you have these large toroidal transformers, and those typically generate a lot of heat. And so with this one, it generates very little heat. Again, kind of like the 7705, it gets warm to the touch, but it's not boiling. It doesn't get really, really hot like the 8012 does and some of the Denon receivers that I've reviewed. The other thing I love about the amplifier is it just powered my setup with no problem. Guys, there are times, now I don't listen to it continually, really, really loud, but today I had no problem cranking it. I really believe my ears would have given out before the amplifier and that pre-pro gave out. It was pretty stinking loud in here, but it was crystal clear. I mean, there was no point in time that I went, ooh, I better back that down. No, it drove my speakers well to reference level, and I could have easily gone above reference, which I don't recommend, especially for long periods of time. But man, it just sounded really, really good. So guys, I just want to say that this combination in my setup with my speakers sounded phenomenal. So I've been very pleased. I would have no reservations whatsoever recommending the Marantz AV7705 Pre-Pro or the Emotiva XPA-11 or any of the configurations that you can do with that. I think both of these are phenomenal products. I think they're priced at a great price point. And man, it just has a beautiful sound together. So I definitely see how Marantz and Emotiva, man, they sound sweet together. So if you're interested in either one of these units, I'll post the links to both of those down in the description below so you can check those out. Also, any of the movies that I mentioned, you may want to pick those up. I'll have links to those as well. So guys, if you like this type of video, make sure you subscribe to the channel because I've got lots of other cool stuff that I'll be reviewing here soon. And so I produce weekly content a couple times a week. So make sure you're subscribed, hit that bell. And as always, you guys be blessed, and we'll catch you in the next video.